Hello everybody, and welcome to the ribbeting, as well as first, Alchemy deck tech for the Brewing Labs. Now for those who don't know what Alchemy is, it's a new standard variation format that is exclusive to MTG Arena. The basic Catch-22 premise is essentially it's going to include digital-only Alchemy cards, as well as taking cards that are either a little bit powered down in standard or a little overpowered and try to balance the powers out a little bit. So in other words, modify some cards within the existing standard format. It's one that just released recently. It's actually been pretty fun from what I played so far. But as I promised, I was going to get a Frogs deck tech out and the pretty much sequel Frogs 2, more or less. So why are we calling this Frogs 2? Well, it was originally around Grolnok the Omnivore, a very powerful frog for commander, essentially a 4-mana free whenever a frog you control attacks. You mill free cards, and then whenever a permanent card is put into your graveyard from your library, you exile it with a Croak counter on it. Anyway, you may play lands and cast spells from among cards you own and exile with Croak counters on them. Now, originally this was just going to be a Simic value deck where we were essentially just going to mill our cards, get value on it, and then essentially try to grow up creatures and get them into stomping range. However, I kind of wanted to get the second frog, a new one that came from Alchemy, into this list as well, which is Gitrog, Horror of Zavat. This is an exclusive Alchemy card, so exclusive to Arena. It's a 4-mana sit legendary creature frog horror with menace. It has a lot of text, but basically amounts to at the beginning of the combat, it's a desecration demon. Essentially, our opponent may choose to sacrifice a creature to tap it. If our opponent does that, then we seek a land card from our library, which for those who don't know, seek basically means that it just gets the card out of your library, you don't have to tutor it and such. It seeks the land card and then puts on the battlefield tab. Now note, as of this recording, there is a little bit of a glitch with this, where with leak sand, or brain fart there, with land-seeking cards, it still quote-unquote kind of looks like it keeps it in your hand, even though you can't play it. It's an interesting little bug. I just thought I would let you know, so if you notice like I'm not playing like any lands and such, they've already been played on the battlefield, so to speak. However, this also has another nifty ability once we play lands, which is it makes anytime a land enters the battlefield under our control, it perpetually, which means that it permanently keeps it no matter which zone it goes to, it perpetually gains green or black, sacrifice this land to draw a card. So in other words, this is a really good Gitrog for actually the Gitrog Brawl decks, which is kind of amazing to be honest with you. You can have your Gitrog with your Gitrog. But nevertheless, I decided to include this feature deck tech, include this essentially couple frogs because, well, it gives my editor an excuse to do a Bad Boys 2 reference with either in the thumbnail or maybe even with one of the intro skits. But also it is kind of like a fun deck design challenge as well. So basically the premise is it's kind of a sultai value deck. So in our 1-drop slots we have Willgeist, which is a ridiculously good synergistic card with Grolnok. Basically because what happens is when it's on the battlefield, whenever one or more cards leave our graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Willgeist. And then when Willgeist dies, you gain life equal to its power. Due to the way Grolnok works, it individually checks if a card is a permanent or not and goes into the graveyard. So if we mill free cards, and they are free permanent cards, then essentially it will exile them individually, which then will individually put a +1 counter on Willgeist. So free mill cards, free counters on Willgeist. Very powerful ability, and when it dies, we gain life equal to its power, which is pretty relevant, especially with a lot of the burn we've been seeing in the meta, at least within the Alchemy meta, within the first week at the very least. Next up, Tenacious Pup. Still one of the cutest cards that came out of the set, but also a very good card. A 1-mana 1/2, when it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. And then when you cast your next creature spell, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter, trample counter, and vigilance counter on it. So it essentially makes our 2-drops a lot more of aggressive as well as sticky threats. But also later down the line, being able to get a Grolnok or a Gitrog with trample and vigilance, that can be really absurd as well as all of our other creatures in the deck. There's even times where just even getting it on a Prosperous Innkeeper and Ogler, while not amazing, gets the job done at the very least. And then that actually leads us perfectly into our 2-drop slots, which we do have another new Alchemy card, which is Ogler, Devoted Assistant, 1 in a blue for a 1/1. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top 2 cards of your library and then put one of them into your graveyard. So it does help us filter our deck a little bit, which is nice. But also, whenever a creature card is put into your graveyard from your library or hand, it perpetually gains When this card leaves your graveyard, create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. Very good in this deck design, mostly because it's the same thing kind of like with Willowgeist. Once we attack with our frogs and mill, it essentially is going to elect each instant of mill, and then what happens is essentially it's going to perpetually get the zombie kind of like creation ability, and then it gets exiled by Gronok, which then technically means it leaves the graveyard, which then allows us to get the zombie token. I only wanted to put it in as a 2-of because it's not like 100% synergistic, because we do have to have Gronok on the battlefield for this to work, but when it works, it works. Prosperous Innkeeper is in here for just primary ramp as well as a little bit of life gain, mostly just being able to play this turn 2 and then turn free one of our frogs, or even removal, or Garrick. We'll get to Garrick in a minute. Very, very nice. We also have Ranger class in here, just a very powerful card in any green decks in general. Being able to create the token, being able to level it up to make it when our creatures get bigger when attacking, and then have the ability to free in a green to make us be able to look at the top card of our library and cast creature cards from the top. Very, very nice for this deck. Helps us late game. Then we have, of course, since we're playing a frog deck, we have to play Croaking Counterpart. 1 green and a blue. Create a token that's a copy of a target non-frog creature, except it's a 1/1 green frog. So this is really good because, like I said, this format is either burny or a little bit greedy. So being able to copy maybe one of our opponent's more valuable creatures, maybe with a good ETB, or like a good death trigger, very nice. We could also copy our own stuff, like we could copy a Prosperous Innkeeper if we need to ramp and such. There's even other cards we could copy within our deck design and such, that's really nifty. We could even copy Grizzled Huntmaster. Okay. A lot of people have been a little bit talking about this card, more or less because it has a lot of tets. I mean, that's the joke. The joke is this card has way a lot of tets. But, to basically explain what this card does, at its basic, you can exile a creature card from your hand, and if you want to thin out your deck, you can also exile creature cards from your deck if you want to. We're not going to use that majority of the time, but that's an option for us. But what we do is, once you exile a creature card from your hand, or even maybe multiple of the same copy, if there's multiple in your hand, you then get to go into your sideboard and conjure, which is another new mechanic in Alchemy, which basically amounts to you create a card. It's kind of like a token card in a sense, but it's an actual card. You create a card in your hand of a card from your sideboard. And as you can tell, there's a reason why we're only running 3 of these. It's because with Grizzled Huntmaster, we actually can get these cards from our sideboard. Our Gitrog, our Gronok, our Froghemoth. Ishkana, another new Alchemy card, does also have the draft mechanic, which is really fun. Being able to just get more board presence on the battlefield. Very, very nice. But draft, for those who don't know, I'm just going through all the Alchemy mechanics. Consider this, editor, can you put this on the top here, the Alchemy mechanic introduction video. With starring frogs. Anyway, and spiders, I guess, from this one. But the basic premise of this one is, what it does is, there's 15 cards usually within a card spellbook. You get 3 random cards from that spellbook, and then essentially you can draft, aka pick one of those cards. For the record, it doesn't reduce the spellbook once you quote-unquote pick a card from it. It is still going to be the same amount, it's just going to randomly get 3 cards in the spellbook each time you draft, and you can pick a card from them. So for here, I'm not going to show all the spell book, but the basic X22 premises, it's just all spiders. A lot of spiders or spider synergy cards. Then we have Slowgrip the Overslime in here, mostly because we are going to mill a lot of lands. That's also very synergistic to our deck, but I didn't really want to put it in the main. But put it in the side, it's very nice. Hinterland Chef, also same thing with the spellbook mechanic. This is just basically a bunch of very cheap creatures that can become food, which is very nice. And Tireless Anger, basically just a lot of fish. Some really good fish, some not so good fish, but if we need to, we can get this later, be able to... It's hard because I didn't want to go too crazy on Tireless Anger, since our island count is literally just 1 card. Technically 2, I guess you could say. But if we have an option where we play this and we have an island in hand, and we think that would be a better design, we could do that. But to be honest, this is more just in there just for fun and gags. If we get into that situation, I would cut this out for another good card within the deck design. But this is the first time playing Alchemy, we're going to try some experimental cards. Then on our 4-drop, with including our Star Frogs, we also have Binding of the Old Gods, just very good removal as well as ramp. Also, getting our creatures control gain Death Touch is very relevant within this deck. We also are playing a one of Garruk Wrath of the Wilds, a very powerful 4-drop planeswalker, just being able to +1, choose a creature card in our hand, and perpetually buff it, as well make it cost less. That's very good. And then -1, draft a card from Garruk's Wrath of the Wild spellbook, which is a bunch of free cost beasts as well as 1 enchantment, and put it onto the battlefield. Doesn't go to your hand, this one actually goes to the battlefield, which is very powerful. And then -5, which from playing with Garruk, I never really get to the -5, but it is an option as a finisher. -5, until end of turn, creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample. Very powerful ultimate ability. Then we get to our late game slots, which is Froghemoth, which is just a very powerful frog horror in general. Just being able to beat Graveyard Hate within our deck design, and it gets bigger as well as gain us life. Very great for this deck design. As well as we put in the Ancient Green Warden, which is this one might be a weird one, until you remember that little thing about Gitrog, where it has the ability that we can spin green and black on lands we play while it's on the battlefield, to sacrifice it and draw a card. So, this is in here for late game if we're going against like a control deck where we can sacrifice lands and then draw the cards, but then if we need to play lands, we can use Ancient Green Warden to play the lands back to our graveyard. Back from our graveyard to our library. It's a Crucible Worlds, essentially, for those who don't know that card. Plus, also, it being a 5/7 with reach is actually pretty good in this meta, since there's a lot of flyers, aka dragons. So it's not bad to have a 5/7 reach with a big butt, let me put it like that. Anyway, that is the deck. We're going to play some very riveting gameplay and show this deck off. Why not? Okie dokie, let's test for Bad Frogs 2, shall we? Okay, let's give this a shot. Okay, this hand is decent, not amazing. Honestly, it's going to be a little bit slow, but I think that's perfectly fine. We can play this tapped, then we can play this land, play the Ogler down, then we can play theoretically, the Tenacious Pup turn free to try to get Gitrog to have the Trample and Vigilance, which is very powerful. It can make our incentive for our opponent to make us ramp a little bit. However, our opponent's playing their own turn 1 Tenacious Pup, which means that they're probably going to be doing some, dare we say, have a pretty good turn 2 play. Like, yep, this is the Werewolves aggro deck. This turn 2, turn 1, the pup combo here is pretty silly. Ooh, we are going to have some trouble. Okay, Prosperous Innkeeper, Ancient Green Warden's a little too slow for this matchup, so I think we're going to play that. And I think what we're going to do here is play Deathcap Blade, play this, get the treasure, play the treasure to go get a pup, so that our Gitrog next turn can get a little big, and we gain a little bit of life to help us survive against the potential onslaught. And then next turn, presuming if our opponent doesn't remove our Oglor, we will probably go try to get an untapped land. But for now, we're going to take 4. I find that interesting, but sure. Okay, can we get an untapped land? No, but another Prosperous Innkeeper or Ranger class. I think Ranger class is the better option here. Because it gives us a creature, but it's not cast, which is nice and relevant for this deck. Plus, it allows us to block this a little bit more efficiently. The question is, do we want to go all the way block to get rid of the Paxon Pup? Depends on how they attack here. Yeah. I think that is the better choice. It feels bad, but if we don't get rid of this now, it's going to be a problem. This 5/4 is annoying, but it's not going to be the end of the world. Here, I think we want Gitrog to have this ability. And now we force our opponent to either want to tap it down. It'll keep our opponents... We're either going to be dealing a lot of damage with the Gitrog, or it's going to make our opponent have to keep their board presence in control. Which, hey, and it helps us ramp, which is perfect. So we're going to save the Tenacious Pup to block this 5-4, or whatever it's coming. Because they did foretell something, which tells me that they're probably playing a wolf that essentially, every time a turn you foretell, it essentially gets bigger and bigger and bigger, which is a very good card, I would say. Glorious Sunrise, also a very, very good card for our opponent. They're going to draw a card. We might take the 5 here. Yeah, I think we're going to take the 5 here. Then here, I want to play the Gitrog, but we're not going to.
You son of a...
To probably be able to attack with a wolf this turn, unless if our opponent wants to sacrifice their 5-4, which I highly doubt they're going to do. They might not. We'll see. They don't. That's perfect. We're going to swing in for 7. It's a frog, so we're going to mill some cards. Perfect. We milled some lands and creatures. That's very nice. That gets our Will of Geist really big. Very nice. The frog duo is here to shine. Then we play a land to get the Gitrog ability, which is very nice. Kind of wish Ogler was also in here, but we could technically tutor Ogler from the sideboard. Actually, we can, presuming if our opponent can't remove the Gronok here. But we'll see what our opponent plays here. Another Glorious Sunrise.
Double sunrise. Oh my god.
Okay, they are setting up for a turn, let's just say. But what do they do here? Do they do the ramp, or do they do the draw? Okay, does our opponent want us to tap down our Gitrog? I think they're just trying to draw for a cheap creature, that way they can sack it to the Gitrog, essentially. No cheap creature, it seems. But if they do attack, we can block with the Will of Geist, but we're probably not going to. Okay, we got a few choices here, but what I think I want to do, because I want to show off this combo, and the use of how Grizzled Huntmaster could just be used to just, essentially, since we already have a Gitrog on the battlefield, we're just going to exile this. We're not going to exile our library, we're going to end the search, and then we're going to get... Oh, I forgot to put Ogler in the sideboard. But, hang on. We have free mana. We can get the next best thing, which in this case, it's the Slowgurk. Which, yet again, as I mentioned before, does have synergy within our deck design, potentially. Especially if we mill a lot of lands. Okay, now we can see if our opponent wants us to... They do not. Okay, so we're going to do this. Attack with the frog, get the mill engine going, and we get a few lands as well, which is perfect. So our Slowgurk gets a little big. Oh, now I remember. I don't have Ogler since I don't have a third Ogler. Now I remember why I don't have Ogler in the sideboard. Though, you could make an argument of actually making the deck design where you only have Ogler in the sideboard, and then just bring it out when you have the Huntmaster trigger, as well as Gronok. That's something I really need to consider for a second design of the deck, to be honest with you, now that I'm coming to think of it. Well, there goes Gitrog. But, well... I think we'll be fine, as the saying goes. Because all we have to do is do this. We'll go get this. Gain some life. And honestly, we attack, we attack, we attack, we attack, like that. We'll give the frog a counter on it, and honestly, see, we milled a lot of cards, so we didn't mill any lands, but we still milled enough to make our Will of Geist a little bit big, let's just say. We'll see how our opponent blocks here. If I was the opponent, I would definitely try to block to get the Gronok if I can. But I don't think they can at this moment, or else they die, because, yeah, 10, 14, 19, they have to block very specific creatures here. And they decided that they can't, so... First match with Bad Frogs 2, major success. Woohoo! Splendorana to the pepperoni. Okay, let's see who we're going against. We're going against Diomedes. Okay, this should be interesting. Let's see. Our hand... It's... I think I know what we're going to do here, but I'm going to put this in tap. We could do a turn 1 pup here, but I think I'd rather do the mana ramp first, or actually, better yet, I think I would rather do the Ranger class first. Build up our board presence. If our opponent has removal, we don't mind them removing the Wolf token. Okay, red-black treasures, it seems to be the case. Yep. Okay. Well, we did get a land, so what I think I'm going to do here is play this. Play this on green. And play Tenacious Pup, believe it or not. Not attack in. Mostly the reason why I'm thinking here is I could exile a card from my hand and get one of our frogs to start the frog shenanigans. Plus, also just being able to get Grizzled Huntmaster, all those keyword abilities is not going to be bad. So, here I'm going to play this on the green side. We're going to play the Grizzled Huntmaster. It's going to get the abilities and such. We're going to gain a life. And here, I think we can take out the Prosperous Innkeeper since we're getting good on the lands. And in theory, with the inevitable, we're going to end search. We don't want to do that. So we're going to go get our Gitrog. And best enough, we have 1 mana to play the Tenacious Pup, which then gets us some life. And as well as make Gitrog into a big scary boy. Or girl. It. Actually, I really don't know Gitrog's gender. If anyone wants to say it in the comments, go right ahead. And here, we have the treasure to actually just get the ability here. Let's see if our opponent is in the sacking mood. They probably are to get rid of the Prosperous Innkeeper on the Shambling Gas or to get a treasure. Decide not to. Okay, in that case, we're going to get our Grizzled Huntmaster to be a little bit bigger. And see how our opponent wants to do this trade, if they want to. Ooh. Our opponent does get some good cards from that, not gonna lie. But we do get a Froghemoth, which is pretty good top deck, if I say so myself. Now our opponent sacks to do that. We do get a little bit of ramp, which is nice. And I stated before, there is this little glitch that Arena has where technically it shows you, but it doesn't put the land automatically onto the battlefield. Here, we're going to buff up the Froghemoth so that our opponent can't trade. They're going to do that because the graveyard hate is, essentially, they didn't want the massive graveyard hate. Here we're going to take out the Dragon Necromancer just to make sure that they can't reanimate that, because then they have access to cards to our deck. Exactly, like that. So here, I think I'm just going to level this up. Create the Wolf token. See if our opponent has any more removal. Judging them being the treasure deck, they probably have Goldspan Dragon, stuff like that. They maybe even have Immerstrom Predator. This can be a pretty good list, but it seems like they're mostly going into the zombie deck with this. Okay, a Meat Cook Massacre. Makes sense. Get a little bit of life back, as well as drain us a bit. Makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to see how good it is to be able to sacrifice lands. We're going to sacrifice a land to draw a card. Put this here to remind ourselves that technically... Ooh, that's a wolf. Okay.
You require my aid. Do what I demand.
Well, there we go. Play that. Kind of grateful our opponent didn't decide to sack there, because now we could actually play Grown-Up and get the frog, Aww. Well, we can at least do this, draw the card. This is going to be a tricky matchup. And they steal a frog. No. That's a little annoying. But, like I said, we do have a buffed up Ranger class, so... we can sacrifice, see if we can get into a play. Oh boy, we are getting land flooded. But I do have to admit, having the perpetual ability on these lands do help out a lot. Would be kind of nice if we draw that one, like, elemental that can essentially make us play lands from our graveyard. I feel like that would be very nifty in this matchup. I kind of want to hope that our opponent attacks with the Loki, or Volky. But let's be frank, they were trying to go with Loki bot. Oh, boy. We might just be dead, because that's a good card. Yeah, we might just be dead. Well, here we're going to play this as our land, because while this is a good card, it is not good in the quote-unquote, not as good as that. But yet again, I think the problem is, well... they're just going to trade with one of their demons, probably. Yep. Well, on the bright side, we at least survive for a turn, so there's some plus in that. Here, I'm going to double block the spider, just because we don't want them to sacrifice it. We'll gain a few lives. To at least compensate the life lost a little bit.
I will get what I want.
And then they make more spiders, which then they could sacrifice to the Dreadfast Demon. Yeah, we are going to need, like, top deck of the century if we want to survive this.
My
Don't
will
know if we
cannot be
do
denied.
have anything, though, to accommodate that. And that's not a good top deck, so we're going to say a good game to our opponent, and move on to the next round. Still, this is a great match because it does show some of the niftiness of the pretty much the tutor card to help us get our frogs when we need them. So, very good. On to the next round. And that, my friends, is Bad Frogs 2. I hope you enjoyed the shenanigans. The only modification I would say to the deck is maybe include a little bit of more early game removal, especially if you have like any creatures that can fight and such. Like if we get anything that's like a Ravenous Chupacabra and stuff, that's definitely something to consider within this deck design. Also, other cards, one modification I did to the deck is I actually put a Olgar replacing the Tireless Anger so that we can have access to all of our combo shenanigans. Nevertheless, I hope you all enjoyed this deck tech. I definitely had fun with the games. Next week, we're going to... Let's just say there's going to be a lot of Huntmasters and a lot of birds. Let's just put it like that. See you soon. Bada beep, bada boop.